Kenya's tax regime kicks in today and is being kicked against by the business community, even as forecasts mount that the East African largest economy will grow nearly 7% in the current year. George Bodo is the director at Callstreet Research and Analytics, and he joins us now from Nairobi. Good evening, my friend, and I appreciate your coming through on the program. It's about 9:30 there in Nairobi. We appreciate your time. Anytime you're able to join us, George. Thank you. When we talk about the outlook on Kenya's economic growth forecast, about 6.9%, this looks like very ambitious. Who is putting these numbers out?
There are two sets of people putting out those numbers. The first set of people is the National Treasury and the entire fiscal policy making fraternity. And the reason why they like to put them such rosy is because of revenue projections. They put them so rosy because they can put nice, rosy revenue projections so that Parliament can approve them. And the second set of people is the multilateral institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, of course, so that they can get business.
But what's your view on this forecast? Are they ambitious?
Extremely ambitious. When you talk about a growth above 6% in 2021, I just struggle to see where it's going to come from. If you look at all the indicators, they're looking all down. I mean, revenue on the fiscal side is looking so weak. On the private sector side, I just don't see where the growth is going to come from. I mean, if you look at, for instance, private sector credit growth is just about 7%. It's been so depressed for the last 3 years. If you look at things like core inflation, it just shows you that both the supply and the demand side of the economy are so depressed. I mean, businesses are closing down, cutting down production. You have on the demand side the layoffs that we're talking about, almost 2 million layoffs in 2020. I just don't know what's going to power growth. And by the way, the government is not spending. The government is also very broke because most of the growth over the last 5 years has been from the government side, the government spending on infrastructure projects. We don't have many infrastructure projects this year and the next year.
So the government in Nairobi, the Kenyatta's administration is looking at a new tax regime. It kicks in this month. Businesses are kicking against it. So I'm not too sure. Will the government have a rethink on this? Because it looks like the administration is every shilling it can get.
Yeah, so the thing is that if you look at Kenya's fiscal trajectory for 2021 and into 2023, for me, it's so weak. And the government is literally doing everything it can to tax, to extract much revenues from it. I mean, the government, for me, in my view, is for lack of a better word, is taxing anything that is moving today. We now have we have now two taxes taking into effect. We have the digital service tax. This is for any digital transaction, whether you're paying you're making electronic payments, you're buying something online, even on the mobile. You're charged 1.5% of the value of that transaction. So you have the DSE kicking on January 1st. You have the minimum tax. By the way, they have a minimum tax now. I think it's pegged at about 1%. So minimum tax is such that even if you're making losses as a business, you pay tax. So I think it was designed for, if I look at it critically, it was designed for those transfer pricing cases where businesses, especially foreign dominant businesses, declare losses. But apparently, there's a collateral damage. Even local business not paid.
So, in terms of how the tax revenue will work out, do you think the economy can support these various tax regimes being rolled out for 2021?
No, they can't support. By the way, I forgot to say that even the COVID-19 tax relief measures that the government announced in June 2020, they lapsed now. So what the government did was they reduced the value-added tax from 16 to 14%. They also loosened the income tax bands such that people earning equivalent of about $200 and below are not paying tax. Now they've all brought back those measures which Parliament approved just about a couple of days back. So I don't think the economy has the capacity. The economy actually in actual sense needs fiscal support. It needs fiscal stimulus. If you look at across the Atlantic, Europe, people are sending stimulus checks to households. Now, that's what the economy needs, which which the government is not. I just don't know how this is going to turn out, but it's looking very bleak.
Okay, so let's cross over to the monetary policy straight. What is your outlook on that? Do you think the Njoroge's central bank would be able to help the Kenyatta's administration provide some powder for the economy?
That's a dicey question. The monetary policy, the way I look at it today in Kenya, monetary policy for me is held hostage. And I say that because because I'm looking at a situation where we have a very dominant fiscal policy, and the governor is and the entire committee, they have to be cognizant. Any move that they do, they have to be cognizant of the government weak fiscal position. So, for instance, today I don't see over the next even 2-3 years that they can actually jack up interest rates, because if they do, the moment they do that, then the government's cost of domestic debt will go up. And then you have a government that I think is likely to continue deepening that domestic borrowing. So they are all being held hostage by the current scenario. And also they have on the other side, they also have a very chaotic foreign exchange market that they also need to manage. So I think in terms of monetary policy coming in and giving the economy a boost, I just don't see it.
So would you be looking forward to the IMF, the World Bank, the FDB? Who are you looking forward to? The Chinese to help give you some fiscal stimulus in Kenya? So
I've got two things here. My view is that one is Kenya needed to go for the debt service suspension. And the debt service suspension should exclusively target China. Because today we are paying, in the current fiscal year and the next fiscal year, about the next 3 fiscal year, we are paying about $1 billion in debt service to Chinese debt. And we have a total exposure of just slightly over $7 billion. So they need to renegotiate the repayments, postpone them. Because what the government needs today, and most African governments for that matter, is that liquidity reprieve. If they can suspend the debt payments for even 2-3 years, and then they resume, they need the liquidity reprieve. And that's one. The other thing, of course, is the multilaterals that keep knocking on the door. We are now talking about, I think that there's a negotiation between the World Bank and IMF for some budgetary support, but I think the key thing here for me is we are not talking about fiscal consolidation, which has been a story in the government circles for the last 3 years. And it's showing space. Kenya doesn't have any fiscal space to respond, has never had fiscal space to respond to the pandemic.
Also, let's talk about the valuation for Kenyan banks, because it's all going to come down to this transmission mechanism in every economy, which is the banking system. Post-COVID, 2021 or beyond, what's your valuation outlook?
I think banks are likely to continue trading below book value. And when I say that for two reasons. One is that the loan books quality are looking so bad. I think my view is that my back of the envelope numbers tells me that industry NPL ratio is at 50% now. And for some banks, I think it could be higher, especially the bigger balance sheets. Some of them I'm looking at 55, 60%. A KCB, which is the largest bank, has said that by the end of by quarter 4 2020, they were expecting to restructure quarter of their loan book. And for that size of loan book, that's quite significant. So one is the loan book quality it's not looking good. And the second is the earnings from this, because the banks have not had any significant volumes for the last 3-4 years. And you could see the income statement is being shredded. It's been shredded over the last 3 years. And so the earnings quality is very poor, no volumes. They will need more capital actually for this year, next year. I should expect to see some level of tier 2 and tier 1 fundraising just to reinforce the balance sheet because of the impact of the coronavirus. So I don't see them paying dividends this year, no dividend next year. On that basis, I think the likelihood below book value, which is not good by the way.
George, I'm looking for one good news. Give me something. 30 seconds.
There's no good news.
Have a great day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
You need to get to bed. It's 9:45 or so in Nairobi. Get to bed. Sleep over it. Maybe next week I'm going to ask you again. Give me one good news. I'm sure there's one good news somewhere there in Kenya. Thank you so much, George, from Callstreet and one of the directors. Have a pleasant evening.